Hey guys, it's Sean here from Cracked Housing Fab coming to you with another video of some cool stuff. Hanging out here with the star of the show on this video series, the turbo. So that's right, we are going to put a turbo on the Tacoma. Stay tuned. Okay guys, so we're going to get started on this. I know that there's a bunch of different ways to do this process, and there's 1,000 different opinions, as I'm sure that you guys will let me know in the comments, but I'm going to show you the way that I plan on doing it. It may go very well, it may not go well, it might blow up, might throw a rod through the side of the block. I don't know what's going to happen, but I want to show you guys my step-by-step, so if you want to recreate it, you can. We're going to go through some of the parts, and then we'll kind of go through things as we go through the video. Might be one video, might be two videos. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but you'll know once we get the videos out. But we're going to start, I'm going to start with the thing that sucks the most, and that's pulling the oil pan off. As you can see, I've already got some of it started, but I'll show you what I did underneath. Also really quick guys, a few things that I did. I read a lot about this before I actually did the process, and I did want to give a shout out to a few resources that I had to do my research. First of all, I need to give a shout out to Yellow Shop Builds. These guys have a really cool channel. They do some kind of out-of-the-box thinking. Ironically, his name is Sean as well. He has a really cool 3rd Gen 4Runner that he did, a top mount turbo build. Basically the same thing that I'm doing. Also, on Tacoma World, this thread right here by Geo Guitar Dude. Great thread to read through. A lot of good resources there. Learned a lot from that one as well, and a bunch of other sources, but those are the two sources that I got the most information. Again, Sean over at Yellow Shop Builds helped me out. I messaged him on Instagram, so go show him some love. He's a really cool channel. They're about the same size that we are, and just trying to make it. So if I can help him out, he helped me out. So all right, let's get started. Okay, here I'm underneath the truck. The engine's up there. So there's a few different ways you can do it. You can pull the engine out, or you can drop the front diff and unbolt the oil pan and drop it down so that you can add your oil drain to it. I didn't want to pull the engine. It's more work than I wanted to do, and this truck has been converted from pre-runner to 4-wheel drive, so everything comes apart easy. Unfortunately, I've had to do this a couple times already, drop the diff. So I will show you just really quickly how that stuff comes apart. It's always tough to do this underneath the vehicle, but right here is the front diff. This, like, again, we have the series on how to convert your pre-runner to a 4-wheel drive, so if you want to see that, check that out too. We have that video series available for you guys. It's 3 bolts to remove the differential from the subframe. So this is a 12mm Allen socket that you'll need to take this guy. I've already loosened this one up. And then you have this big nut right here, and the other nut right here, bolt right here. You'll have to remove your drive shaft bolts, which I've already done. And there are a few plugs and a vent, depending on how yours is. Again, this has been converted, so I don't actually have anything plugged in, just a vent going up to the engine bay. So do that, and then all I do is unbolt the 4 bolts on the ball joint, so you can swivel that out and you can pull your CV axles out. And all you need to do there is right here where the CV axle is, you just stick a pry bar between the differential and the axle and just give it a quick little swat with your hand or the hammer, and that'll pop right out. You can swivel all this out away from there and pull the axle out of the differential. All right, before we get started, just so you guys know what I'm going to be using with my turbo build, I am using some parts from CX Racing, the turbo manifolds, the downpipe for the wastegate, the crossover pipe. That stuff all kind of comes as a kit. This is a turbo T04E from CX Racing. It's a journal bearing turbo. It's just a pretty basic one. Just kind of want to prove it out and see if I can make this thing work. And later I'll upgrade to a little better turbo. I am using a precision wastegate, Innovate AFR, and boost gauge all in one. So there's a few different things that I did. Now this setup can be done at a basic. You could probably do it for between 2,000 and 2,500. Mine would be a little bit more because I did go with the precision wastegate and the Innovate gauge. Those are a little bit more. You can get away with an eBay wastegate if you want to. There are some cheaper ways of doing your boost and AFR with two gauges, but this is the setup I'm going to be running and installing, and just see if we can make it work. Okay, so to pull the axle out, again, like I say, I bolted the bottom 4 ball joint bolts, so this everything can move freely. I already popped the axle out of the differential, so we're gonna work on pulling this guy out. Should come out pretty easy. You can swivel this up and out of your way. Just be careful not to hurt the splines on the CV axle. Okay, axle's out. Obviously you do need to drain your differential fluid before you do that. Always crack the fill plug first before you take the drain plug out, because for whatever reason you may not be able to get that out. Also, while you're in the process of draining that, I drain the oil, because we're going to pull the oil pan off, and I let everything drip and drain out for a good couple of hours, or actually overnight. So that way I know that everything's out of there. So now we're going to get under here, and I'm going to take these two big bolts out, and we'll lower the differential out. Diff is out, not too bad. You can use a wrestle. I can wrestle by myself. Next thing is we have to get the oil pan off. Bolts just go around the outside, take them out, pop the pan off. Have all of the bolts out of the oil pan all the way around. A couple of tips. Back here by the transmission, there's the inspection plate. You have to take that guy off to get to those last bolts across the back. And then there's also a wiring harness. This guy right here, you have to pop out of the little tabs. And you just push the screwdriver in there, release it, and it'll pop down and you can get to the front bolts. Oil pan is out. I'm gonna get this stuff kind of cleaned up, and then we have to drill the hole for the drain. Okay, it's all cleaned up. Got the surface nice and clean. Next step is, I did mark on here where I'm going to drill the hole. Drill the hole there. I have a bung for a -10 AN line. I'm gonna go ahead, I got a step drill. I'm gonna drill that guy and we'll get her welded on. Holes drilled, cleaned up around here. That way I took the paint off so I can weld. There's the bung, so I'm going to go ahead and get that guy welded on. Bung is welded on. I got the new sealant on there, so I'm going to slap that guy back in the truck. All right, oil pan's all back in. There's the bung right here. Oil line hooked up for the drain once I get the turbo bolt on up there. Diff is back in, so now we move on to the next step. I did already unbolt the down pipe, so you'll be able to see the flange right here. That guy, I took these 3 bolts out and took the 2 bolts off here and took this first cat out. All right, here's the cat out. This is that 3-bolt flange that goes up to the engine. 2-bolt flange goes back to the exhaust. So this right here is about 2.5-inch diameter, maybe it's shade over. I bought a 2.5-inch V-band clamp. I'm going to chop this flange off and weld this guy on there. Boom, V-band is welded on. So that's where the downpipe's going to meet up. So they come right down off the turbo, right into here. Yeah, that's 2.5. Now this is going to be hooked up to the factory exhaust system on this truck. Eventually I'd like to do something different there. I need to kind of figure out, do some research what I want to do. But for right now, we're going to run a stock exhaust with the cat. For those guys that have to pass emissions, there's forums out there that they run a turbo and still can pass emissions. It can be a little more difficult, but this should pass emissions no problem. So that's my plan anyway. I don't have to worry about that. I live in Michigan, but those guys that have to worry about that, there you go. Okay, so the V-band all set on that. Now we're gonna have to start taking the stock manifolds. These bolts right down here, it's hard to see with the camera, right there. That bolt, there are 3 bolts on the crossover pipe, which is back there, and that obviously goes over to the other side. So I need to start taking these off. They're a little bit of a challenge, but first off I need to get this whole factory intake out of my way so that way I have room to get down there. Intake is all out, took the hose off. I kind of marked a few things of where they went. I know that I have to figure that out afterwards, but now we can see the manifold a little better. This is the crossover bolts back here, so I'll have to get those off before I take these loose, these other manifold bolts. I was able to crack all these loose before and keep soaking them. That actually came apart pretty easy, so I'm going to concentrate on the crossover bolts. Okay, this is the passenger side. I have all the bolts out, took everything out. Everything, all the studs came out with the nuts on these. That's okay, because I bought brand new studs and nuts, no big deal. Got all the crossover bolts off. Now I'm working on the other side. Okay, on this side, this is the driver's side. You can see the 1 manifold bolt. That one's already loose. I've got 2 of the 3 studs off of the crossover. So that last bolt at the top of the crossover pipe is really tough to get to. This is the last stud to come out of the manifold right there in front of the camera. So I'm hoping to take that one out and I can pivot everything around and hopefully get to that last bolt. Okay, got the manifolds, crossover pipe out. I'm just gonna give you a quick visualization of what you need to do. There's gonna be 6 bolts on each manifold. Again, those came out fairly easy and came out with the stud. And then you've got the 3 crossover bolts. This side I can get to all of them no problem. This side you can get to this one here and this one here, but that one I did have to cut just because there was no way to get that in there. Just so you kind of know what you have to take off the truck to get to the point where you can start putting on the manifolds. Okay, now on to the fun stuff. So this is the CX Racing Kit, which comes with the 2 manifolds, crossover pipe, and the down pipe for the wastegate. It also comes with some miscellaneous gaskets and a couple of V-man clamps for here and here. Overall, looks like a pretty good kit. The machine or the welding looks pretty good. They have a support here for the turbo flange, which is kind of a nice addition. A few things that I think might be a little bit concerning, or not concerning, but a few things that might be something you want to look at. This is the side where the crossover is going to come through here, and then the crossover bolts up to here. You can see on this flange that it's kind of protruding out into the area of the exhaust flow. So I'm going to actually take a carbide bit and kind of blend this a little bit better, because airflow is going to come through and hit that and create turbulence right here. So I don't want that. I'm going to clean that up before I go and start putting the manifolds on the truck. Again, I did buy new studs and nuts, so that won't be a problem going back into the head. So yeah, that'll be, I'm gonna get this cleaned up and then we'll be starting to put some turbo parts on. Okay, getting ready to put the passenger side turbo manifold on. I put the 2 bolts in the front. You can't really tell on camera, but the first 2 holes and the last one in the back at the top. That still allows me to get the manifold down in there and pushed onto the studs. I don't know that you'd be able to do it. I had a couple in the middle in there and I couldn't get the manifold to go on. So that's the scenario there. I did buy OEM Toyota gaskets for the manifolds. I heard some people were having trouble with these. They kept on blowing out on them. And I'm gonna put a little tiny, just a thin layer of sealant, the high temp sealant on here, just in case like this surface is not flat on the manifold. That would kind of take up any variation once I tighten that down, but yep, so I'm going to get this sealant and then get the manifold on. All right, there's the driver's side manifold all installed. Turned out pretty nice. Got all the bolts tightened up, put all the studs in, locked everything down. So now we just got to get the crossover from there around to the other side and then start putting the other manifold on. Crossover tube is in. Just got the V band loose on there so I can mess with it when I get to the other side. So now it's going to be jumping over to the other side manifold. Passenger side manifold is on. A few tips for this. This one up in the front, kind of hard to see, but this one, you can only put a couple of the studs in. I had one back there, and this one I had to thread in while I put the manifold on. A little bit of a challenge, and then also the bolts are tough. I mean, on this one they're actually kind of hard to get to. Underneath, I'd use a stubby 14 ratchet underneath. And then the one that's in the back, last one on the back on the bottom, you have to take the starter out. Starter is 2 12mm bolt or 2 14mm head bolts, 12mm nut for the wire, and then you can pull it out. If you already have your catalytic converter out, it'll come out really easy. You can tighten that. You have to put all your nuts on loose and then tighten everything together, because I put everything on and didn't put that bottom nut on. And then I had to take it all back apart again to put that last nut on there, because there's not enough room in between the header and the stud. Don't make that mistake like I did. Put all your nuts on loose just by hand first and then start drawing them down. But we're to the point now, I think we can at least set the turbo on here and see how it's going to look. All right, got the turbo sitting here. Man, it feels good to get to this point. It's been a lot of work to get to here. I did clock this. It's pretty easy to do. You want your center housing, where your oil flows through, to be perpendicular with gravity, because it's going to flow into the top and go out the bottom down to the drain. So you can loosen up these bolts and clock the hot side, as well as there's bolts on the cold side here that you loosen up and you can turn the cold side housing to face it. This is just a rough idea. I don't know what this is going to end up being until I start setting up the intercooler. I'm going to end this one here, guys. Next up video will be intercooler piping, oiling, and getting the downpipe fabbed up down to the factory exhaust. But yeah, so stay tuned for that, and I'm super excited. I can't wait to get this thing fired up and hear that turbo spool. See you in the next one, guys.